included. We didn't really do a registration on that, but we feel like there'll be a few others walking in because we didn't know for sure until the last minute that this facility might be available for us, so we didn't do a lot of announcing about how to get here. We actually have some other places reserved. That's back to it. But welcome here. For the first time, this conference is co-hosted by School of Education and the Gardner-Webb School of Business. There's an executive track being run in the program that they have put together for us, so we're excited about that collaboration. We are very fortunate to be here. This facility was not scheduled to open until later in the week, if at all, when we got permission from the president to do this event here, so we are the first group to take advantage of this. We're very proud of it. The only downside is that food service is not prepared yet to handle any services there, so we're going to have to use the school cafeteria. But for after this summer or any other events we host through the center, obviously everything can be done right here, and that'll be much more convenient for us. Before I get started with any words, I'd like to bring Dr. Leslie, our provost, to bring greetings from the university.
Thank you, Doug. On behalf of our president, Dr. Frank Bonner, who is not able to be with us today, and the entire Gardner-Webb University community, I am happy to welcome you to the 2012 Summer Leadership Conference. This is an especially auspicious occasion for us here at Gardner-Webb, as this is literally the first scheduled event on the very first day of the Tucker Student Center's opening to the public. And you may think that that's a little risky to host a conference of this size on the first day that a building is open, but the truth is, so do we. But we are grateful to be able to extend the opportunity to you to enjoy these next 2 days in the comfort of new surroundings. We're also grateful for your willingness to serve as institutional guinea pigs, as it were. In fact, Doug, Anthony, I'm wondering if we should have run this event through the IRB, since we are doing a little bit of experimentation on human subjects. But in all seriousness, we are happy that you are here, and we at Gardner-Webb are happy to support the work of both the Center for Innovative Leadership Development and the Center for Ethics and Entrepreneurship. And we believe that there's a remarkable synergy that will emerge as these two institutes work together. I had the opportunity last February, as many of you did, to attend the Emerging Issues Forum in Raleigh, where the focus was on Generation Z, and particularly on the effects of technology on education and commerce and industrial growth in North Carolina. And I think that what we do with technology, especially in education, is critically important. But it seems to me that as critically important as technology is, what is even more critically important is how we transform lives and how we effectively prepare the next generation of educators to prepare the next generation of leaders. What are the strategies that we need to create a workforce of educators who will connect with this new generation of students? Because you know, if we don't get it right, it's not just our educational institutions, our business institutions that will be harmed as a result, but it's in our entire society, our culture, and our world. So we at Gardner-Webb are proud to support the work of both of these very fine centers, and we're very glad that you were here with us today, and we wish you the very best for a productive conference over these next 2 days.
Thank you, Dr. Leslie. At this time, Leif Hamrick is operations manager. There's been a group of people who worked non-stop for several weeks to make sure we can get in this facility. It's under Leif's direction, and he would like to bring us a few words about the opening of this facility.
Thank you, Dr. Gary. would like to welcome each and every one of you here today. We're delighted to have you to come to this facility. As everybody's alluded to, it's brand new. We're excited about it. Bear with us as we go through this process. This is the first time we've had these projectors on. The audio, we're going to drop the walls down after lunch, that you'll see when you come back. This will be 3 separate rooms. So just bear with us as we go through this. And when we come back next year, it may look a little bit different. There won't be some cords hanging up that we have kind of temporary. And we've done the best we could to get everything ready to go, and I'm excited about it. As you're walking around the building, you might see a ladder here and there, or a maintenance guy here and there. Just bear with us as they're working on some lighting things, different projects. So that's really all I have. I'm just so glad that you guys are here. Thank you.
Without Leaf and his crew, we wouldn't be here. We'd be back in the quad going to 4 different buildings like we've done for the last 2 years. So we certainly appreciate that. And I have to recognize John Ball standing in the back of the balcony. John has organized this event and been over here numerous times and worked. So there's a lot of people put a lot of effort in making sure that this will take place. And we certainly appreciate that too. As he mentioned, we'll leave from here to go to lunch, and we come back. We're in room 206 now. 205 will be to my right, and 207 is backwards. 207 to my right, 205 to the left. So there'll be some chairs moved, and the walls will drop. So there are 3 sessions there. There's a 4th session downstairs in the theater room for those of you looking at the research track and those presentations. So we'll be back here at 1 o'clock for that. A couple things we'd like for you to keep in mind is, as Leaf said, bear with us if we have technical issues or some of those things. We think all that's worked out, but we certainly understand with how quickly we've gotten in here that there may be some issues. The agenda is posted in your book, so that you can find that correct room. It's also posted on some monitors throughout the facility, so you can find your way by using those if you happen to put your book down somewhere. For lunch, we will walk about 300 or 400 yards to the cafeteria. Fortunately, weather's down about 10 degrees this week. I'm thinking, where else but on Baptist Christian University could we get that kind of support? We certainly appreciate that. All the threats of any inclement weather are afternoon, so we think we've got your walk covered. If you need some assistance, we do have some golf carts ready and waiting for that, so just call us if you need that. We're committed to continuous improvement of this conference. So in the back of your program, there is a tear-out sheet. It's perforated. We have a box set up out. So before you leave, if this is the only day you're here, please do that today. If you're here today and tomorrow, please give us some feedback on what we might do better and what we do. We're going to begin planning next year's event within the next 3 or 4 weeks so that we can be a little better organized. Now that we know what the facility is like that we can handle, we're going to get started earlier. We'll make every effort to put all the presentations on our website. Tomorrow morning I'm doing an overview back here at 9 o'clock on the Center for Innovative Leadership Development. I'm actually going to show you that link. We're going to put all presentations on that link so that you have access to those materials. So if there's not handouts in your sessions, that was by design, and I think there are some handouts anyway, and that's fine too, but if there's not, you certainly will have access to that. We are also doing a little different takeoff this morning too than the other 2 sessions, 2 summers. We are having 2 keynote speakers. We're very fortunate that both gentlemen agreed to speak, so we decided to make this the big event because we have we feel some areas of expertise and some input into what this conference is about, and this is probably the most valuable thing we'll have throughout. I'm going to introduce the first speaker, and then we have someone to introduce our second one. Our first speaker is Dr. Mitchell Zais, State Superintendent of the State of South Carolina. About 30% of our students in the graduate program in school ed from the state of South Carolina. And we are very pleased that Dr. Zais has joined us so that we can begin to represent those leaders in that area who represent you as students. Dr. Zais took the oath of office as state superintendent on January 12, 2011. He grew up in a military family, attending 10 public schools in 12 years. Before winning public election as the 17th state superintendent of education, he served as president of Newberry College for 10 years. Graduate of the U.S. Military Academy at West Point, he served 31 years on active duty in the United States Army, retiring as Brigadier General. I would personally say, and I think that you feel the same way, we certainly appreciate all of our armed service people and what they do to protect our freedom. During his tenure at Newberry College, enrollment nearly doubled, endowment more than doubled, facilities were constructed and renovated, academic programs were added, and athletic teams competed for NCAA regional and national titles. For the last 3 years of his administration, the prestigious U.S. News and World Report named Newberry College as one of America's best colleges. While at Newberry, he served as chairman of the President Council of both the South Carolina Independent Colleges and Universities and the South Atlantic Athletic Conference. He's also a member on the board of directors for the Foundation for Independent Higher Education, the Lutheran Education Conference of North America, the South Carolina Tuition Grants Commission, the South Carolina Commission on Higher Education, and the Southern Region Education. In addition to his Bachelor's of Science degree in Engineering from West Point, Dr. Zais earned a Master's of Science and doctoral degrees in Social Psychology and Organizational Behavior from the University of Washington, a Master's of Arts degree in Military History from the School for Advanced Military Studies at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, and did postdoctoral studies in National Security Affairs at the National Defense University of Washington, D.C. During his military career, he served in a wide variety of infantry units in Vietnam, the United States, and Korea. He commanded 2 rifle companies, an infantry battalion, a light infantry brigade, and served as deputy commanding general at Fort Riley, Kansas. He was also the Pentagon's chief of war plans. As an assistant professor at West Point for 3 years, he taught organizational behavior, leadership, and management consulting. He served as a White House aide and in Panama as executive assistant to the 4-star commander of U.S. forces in Central and South America. In Kuwait, he was commanding general of U.S. allied forces. He also served as commanding general operations for provide refuge, the task force to care for 4,000 Kosovo refugees who entered the United States. Dr. Zais' last military assignment was the Chief of Staff of the U.S. Army Reserve Command. The headquarters and administers the 184,000 part-time service, 9,000 civilian employees, and 11,000 full-time military members of the Army Reserve. His military awards and decorations include the Distinguished Service Medal, the Defense Superior Service Medal, the Legion of Merit, Bronze Star, Meritorious Service Medal, the Air Medal, the Republic of Vietnam Campaign Medal, Humanitarian Service Award, the Ranger Airborne Combat Infantryman's Badges, and the South Carolina Meritorious Service Medal. He and his wife Susan are the parents of 2 married adult children who graduated from public schools in Newberry. They're members of the Lutheran Church of the Redeemer in Newberry. That said, I'd like to welcome Dr. Zais.
Morning. Morning. I didn't think you were going to have to sit through all of that. It's a pleasure to be here, and I always like to talk about education and leadership. I got my start in the leadership business in January of 1970 as a newly minted second lieutenant. I reported into Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and my captain company commander and gave me some pretty concise instructions. He said, "Lieutenant, I want you to take charge of the 45 paratroopers in 2nd Platoon. You are responsible for all they do and fail to do, both on and off duty. Do you have any questions?" I said, "No, sir." and I've been in the leadership business ever since. And it's a fascinating business. I went to graduate school at University of Washington, where I studied it, and then went and taught that business on the faculty at West Point. And because it involves the human heart and motivation, it is a distinctly unique business. But I'm not here to talk about leadership. I'm here to talk about education policy and really a tidal wave of reform that's sweeping the country in education. Now, the State Board of Education in South Carolina is not what I would call a radical organization. But the State Board of Education wrote a policy statement this year, and I'm going to quote from it. The world has changed profoundly over the past 4 decades. The economy, the role of technology, and our nation's global role have all been transformed. Against this dynamic background, one institution remains mainly unchanged: our elementary and secondary schools. Far too many students are disengaged, dropping out, ill-prepared for jobs and civic responsibilities. And now, as I say, that's coming from the State Board of Education. A lot of the things I'm going to talk about pertain to South Carolina because that's what I know and that's where I have the data. But they could be equally as well said for many states around the country. Now, one thing that you find when you enter government is there's actually nobody in charge. People ask me, I was just being asked, what motivated you to enter politics and run for State Superintendent of Education? And my wife claims it was temporary insanity, but be that as it may. I'm going to cite some statistics that show that I think that education in our country, and especially in South Carolina, but as I said, other countries, need something new. Most of you understand that reading is taught primarily kindergarten to 3rd grade, which is where you learn to read, and in 4th grade to 12th grade you read to learn. And if you hit 4th grade and you can't read, barring some unusual circumstances, you're doomed. According to NAEP data, 38% of 4th graders in South Carolina schools are functionally illiterate, and 32% read below grade level. Should we be surprised that those 38% struggle and fall farther and farther behind, and that when they reach high school, school has become a place of frustration and failure? 28% of South Carolina students fail to complete high school within 4 years, most of whom drop out without the skills to be contributing members of society. Our best and our brightest are those who enroll in 4-year colleges. And despite being the best in their high schools and having relatively decent ACT and SAT test scores, 50% fail to graduate within 6 years, and over 50% require remedial math and English courses. We also know that in South Carolina, and again true for other states, while we have unemployment that hovers in the vicinity of 10%, there are enormous numbers of unfilled jobs in high-tech manufacturing, in the medical industry, that do not require 4-year degrees, but do require post-secondary education. And these are good jobs. Automotive technicians, HVAC technicians. I know welders in our nuclear industry make over $100,000 a year. Electricians, plumbers, they start in the $45,000 to $55,000 a year and move up. The U.S. has fallen from first in the world in high school graduation rate to 18th out of 24 industrialized nations. And I think something that you may be able to relate to, according to the MetLife Teacher Survey in 2011, teacher satisfaction has fallen to its lowest level since 1986. Something's going on in education in America. You've all seen those mobile oil television advertisements that talk about where we stand on PISA, which is the international test that's given to students around the world in math and science. Now, when I spent a year campaigning and traveling about the state, one thing I kept hearing again and again was, well, Mick, you know, our problem is we just got all these poor kids. You know, they come from bad families, their parents don't care about education, and there's just not much you can do with those kids. And I'm here to tell you that is absolute nonsense. Poor kids and children from difficult home environments can learn. We know that a child who does poorly with one teacher may do very well with another teacher. We know that students in Harlem's Success Academy, a public charter school where students are chosen based on lottery, perform equally as well as students in New York City's academic magnet schools where children are chosen based on admissions tests. We know that countries with significantly higher levels of poverty than the United States, India, China, South Korea, outperform American students. And my views are shaped by my experience as an infantry soldier for 31 years. The young men who I was working with, by and large in high school, were not on the college track. Many of them didn't finish high school. And not a small number of them were infantry soldiers because that was the best of the two options the judge gave them. But the vast majority have the ability to learn, to be hardworking, law-abiding, tax-paying, contributing members of society who, after 3 or 4 years in service, take off the uniform and return to their communities as contributing members. Most significantly, we know that in South Carolina and across the country, there are schools with very high levels of poverty that are knocking it out of the ballpark. They are doing a great job. When I look at the schools in South Carolina of high poverty that are doing great and those that are failing miserably, the difference is not the demographics of the students, the geography of the schools, or the education level of the parents. The difference is the competence of the adults in the system, starting with the school board. Where you have competent leadership, you will have great teachers, and you will have successful students. Where you have ineffective leadership, you will find a concentration of ineffective teachers, and students will be failing. And I'll come back to that in a little bit. I believe that no child should be forced to attend a failing school, and that low-income families should enjoy the same right that high and middle-income families have always enjoyed, which is to choose a school that's a good fit for their children. Of course, high-income families do that by putting their children in private schools. Middle-income families do that by moving to school districts that are highly rated, primarily in the suburbs. It's only low-income families who are trapped in failing schools where zip code is destiny. Now, we know that reading is key to success in school. And we also know that students from language-rich homes who've grown up hearing standard English with precise pronunciation, correct grammar, appropriate and extensive vocabulary, and who have been read to are going to learn to read far more readily than students who've not enjoyed those advantages. We also know, especially if you're a parent, that while every child is special, every child is different. They differ in ability, motivation, the rate at which they mature, their interests, their skill set, their personality, and their home environment. Despite these enormous differences, our traditional model of education expects every child to enter the same classroom and learn the same material on the same schedule. This is a one-size-fits-all, factory-like, assembly line model that ignores individual differences and focuses on seat time rather than mastery. It's a system based on mass production and standardization rather than customization and individualization. It's a school-centered model rather than a student-centered model. It focuses on inputs, what's taught, how it's taught, how many hours it's taught, rather than outputs, what the student knows and can do. The surprising thing for me is it actually works for most students. For far too many, that model produces frustration and failure. Because students enter school ready to learn to read at very, very different levels, with different backgrounds, and because every student is different, I believe that parents should have a choice in the kinds of schools that their children attend, a menu of options, which include not only our traditional schools, which would be the right fit for most kids, but public charter schools, public magnet schools, virtual, cyber, or online schools, single gender programs. By the way, South Carolina leads the nation in single gender programs. Year-round schools, which work for a lot of kids. When we lived in California, my children attended a public year-round school that was a good fit for them in elementary school. Montessori programs work for some children. Military schools are a good fit. In the poorest part of Charleston, South Carolina, we have a military magnet school that's 96% students of poverty with a graduation rate of 98%. Arts-infused programs are a good fit for some children. Homeschool works for a few. Public magnet schools are a good fit. Alternative schools for kids who are discipline problems work for those kids. Career and technology centers and academies, private schools, math and science focused academies and STEM programs work for some kids. You know, if you're a girl in middle school or high school and you're not pretty or popular, and you're a guy and you're not cool or a jock, middle school and high school can be a nightmare. And by providing options for kids who may be arty or who love science and math, who may not fit in, if you provide an environment where those kids have their unique talents and gifts celebrated and uplifted and they're with other kids like them, those children blossom. I also think there should be more flexibility in our high school program. As a college president, when a student showed up on our campus as a freshman, frankly, we didn't care if they could deconstruct plot development in a British novel, understood the structure of an ode, or could explain iambic pentameter. We did expect them to be able to speak standard English with correct grammar and appropriate vocabulary, in complete sentences, and we expected them to be able to write a coherent paragraph or a well-organized business letter. Sadly, that is not the focus of instruction in our high schools and what is English language arts, which is primarily literature appreciation. The premise being if we can teach students to appreciate fine literature, they will read and they will learn those oral skills and those writing skills. To which I would say, how's that working for you? It's not. In the English language arts arena, I believe that business writing might, for example, be a legitimate substitute for British literature, or that public speaking could be a legitimate substitute for world literature. In the math arena, where did the standard sequence of Algebra 1, geometry, Algebra 2, pre-calculus come from? And why is that embedded around this nation as the standard high school math sequence? The answer is, in 1896, the president of Harvard University got together with 9 other East Coast elite university presidents. They organization that was cleverly called the Committee of 10. And they bemoaned the fact that high school students were ill-prepared for college. Bear in mind that in 1896, only 10% of the American population went beyond 8th grade. And of those who did, the numbers enrolling in college were a small percentage. And that's where that standard sequence came about. Now, I can promise you, now I had 32 semester hours of advanced calculus when I got an engineering degree. I'm not a rocket scientist, so I've never used calculus. I've never even in real life been called on to solve a quadratic equation. But I have had occasion to use some pretty complicated math that I was ill-prepared to do. And I'm talking about personal finance and business math. I believe that might want to be the default option rather than pre-calculus, where students can learn about the math involved in income taxes, insurance, mortgages, the power of compound interest. I mean, and it's not trivial math. I challenge any of you to compute your mortgage payment. I also believe that statistics is far more valuable than Algebra 2. Why is not statistics enshrined in the high school curriculum? Because as a science, it did not exist in 1896. Statistics has been developed in the 20th century to explain gambling, actually. That's where we started to study statistics. But if you're called on to evaluate research, and as educators, we are called upon to do that all the time, statistics is what tells you what is meaningful and what is not. Now, people say, Mick, these are all fine and good ideas, but, where's the money going to come from to pay for all of this stuff? Education is very expensive. Well, I found that there's two perspectives on funding education. The one that I most commonly hear is this: well, if it's good for the children, then the taxpayers ought to fund it. The problem with that perspective is that parents don't get to decide what's good. The requirement for funding is unlimited, and taxpayers are left with an open-ended liability. I mean, if we use that logic, we'd have a Gold's Gym and an Olympic pool at every school because it's good for the children. The perspective on funding that I think that we need to take is this: given the dollars available, how do we maximize student learning? This perspective has the advantage of focusing on outputs, student learning, not inputs, expenditure. It also invites opportunity for innovation and limits the taxpayer liability. Now, folks will say, yeah, but Mick, education, you can't run it like a business because, in manufacturing, every widget's the same, but every child is different. And my response is, you're absolutely right. Education's got nothing in common with manufacturing. Education is a service delivery challenge, just like law and medicine, where every legal client and every medical patient is different. And the imperatives that drive excellence in law and medicine, accountability, competition, and incentives, have the power to transform education. We know that in every field, poorly structured organizations don't work very well and cost a fortune. Now, traditional models or methods for improving education: improved curriculum, more money, better facilities, and smaller classes have been tried for the last 40 years. They will not work. As I say, we've tried them. Controlling for inflation between 1970 and 2010 nationwide, per pupil spending increased 375%. The number of students enrolled in our nation's public schools during that period increased 9%. The number of adults employed in the system increased 90%. 6%. 10 times the growth rate of students. And what do we have to show for all of that hiring and all of that spending? For the first time in American history, we are facing the prospect of a generation of students less literate than their parents. Now, people say, well, how are you going to fix it? Well, there's no silver bullet, but the most single significant factor in education is the individual teacher. The most powerful method of improving education is to invest in the improvement of teaching and the status of great teachers. There isn't a great school anywhere that doesn't have great teachers, but there are plenty of failing schools that have beautiful facilities, shelves of curriculum standards, and reams of standardized tests. But without great teachers, they don't amount to anything. Now, we know, despite the fact that the teacher is the single most important variable outside the child's home, that there are enormous differences in teacher effectiveness. On average, a teacher in the top 20% will impart 18 months of education in one academic year. A teacher in the bottom 20% will impart 6 months of learning in one academic year, a threefold difference and a 1-year difference between a top and bottom quintile. In fact, differences in teacher effectiveness are far greater than the differences in schools. You are much better off to have a great teacher in a poor school than a poor teacher in a great school. And the sad fact is that a student with an ineffective teacher for 2 or 3 years in a row will fall so far behind that they are unlikely to ever catch up unless there are unusual or extraordinary circumstances. I believe it's unfortunate that we compensate our teachers based on seniority, certifications, and degrees, and that in many instances around the country, effectiveness is not a component of teacher evaluations. I was in the academic magnet school in Charleston, which was recognized by U.S. News & World Report as the best academic magnet school in the nation. And I was wandering around with the principal and walked into a pre-calculus class where the teacher was sitting on a stool with a guitar. I'm sure it had something to do with pre-calculus, but he said, Dr. Zais, I was just there to observe, but he drew me into the class. He said, what are your views on teacher compensation? And my response was, we don't pay our best teachers nearly enough. And if you look at other countries where they have education systems that are going up, they pay their entry-level teachers a lot more. But I believe that we pay our least effective teachers far too much. It's not just me saying this. In 2011, President Obama at the State of the Union address said, and I quote, "After parents, the biggest impact on a child's success comes from the man or woman at the front of the classroom. We want to reward good teachers and stop making excuses for bad ones." Exactly a year later, in the 2012 State of the Union address, President Obama said, "Teachers matter. So instead of bashing them or defending the status quo, let's offer schools a deal. Give them the resources to keep good teachers on the job and reward the best ones. And in return, grant schools the flexibility to replace teachers who just aren't helping kids learn." Now, if the President talks about teacher compensation and the differences in effectiveness in individual teachers for 2 years in a row in the State of the Union address, you know that it is a national issue. You heard, if you were paying attention, that I taught organizational behavior at West Point. One of the things we learned is that in large organizations, jobs should be structured so that average employees produce outstanding results. If average employees produce average results, then the job is too difficult, too complicated, and should be redesigned. I think we ask teachers far too often to be all things to all students simultaneously, and then act surprised when they don't get outstanding results. I think the teacher's jobs needs to be redesigned. After the teacher, the principal is the next among school-related factors that contribute to what students learn. And leadership effects are usually largest in those schools where they are needed the most. Indeed, there are virtually no instances of turnaround of failing schools absent a dynamic and highly effective principal. But like teachers, the range of principal effectiveness varies enormously. Research has shown that a principal in the top quintile will elevate test scores 15 percentile points across the board, and a principal in the bottom quintile will depress test scores 15 percentile points. That's like moving from the 40th percentile to the 70th percentile across a whole school. That's the difference between not going to college and going to college. Now, what makes principals effective? Well, hopefully a lot of you are studying that in both the School of Leadership and our business schools. But let me offer a couple of ideas. To be an effective teacher, you have to be patient. You have to love kids. You have to know your material. To be an effective principal, you've got to think like a CEO, an entrepreneur, and you've got to lead and manage adults. I believe the single most important function that a principal performs is to recruit, develop, motivate, and retain highly effective teachers. Because the teachers are to education what doctors are to medicine, the providers of the service for which the institution exists. When I hear from some districts that, well, we got to cut and pay, so we had to lay off teachers, that makes no sense to me. I know in South Carolina, we don't fund students, we don't fund schools, we fund districts. And our least effective districts take the money, keep what they want, and what's left over goes to the schools. It seems to me that if you've got your priorities right, the first thing you do is fund teachers. And what's left over is what you spend on auxiliary services and administration. I've been in the districts where, I'll give you some numbers here. One district in South Carolina, they receive over $16,000 per student per year in federal, state, and local money. They're also the lowest rated district in the state. And I went to the district and they said, you know, Dr. Zais, we just don't have money to pay the best teachers. And I looked at the numbers and I said, well, let's see, $16,000 per student, actually it's a little more, times 20 students per classroom, that's $320,000 per classroom. How much is the individual teacher getting? The answer was the average teacher salary was $35,000 per student, a little over 11%. Seems to me you could take about another $20,000 or $30,000 out of that $285,000 per classroom that was left over to pay for auxiliary expenses and administration. And you could hire the best teachers in the state. I asked the superintendent, where's all that money going? And I got the deer in the headlights look. And he turned to the business vice president and said, where's all that money going? And he said, I'll have to do some research and get back to you. Superintendents and principals have to think like CEOs and entrepreneurs. And that means investing the education dollars in the area that produces the biggest return on student learning, and that's great teachers. One thing we know, if you're going to hold people accountable, you have to give them authority to affect the decisions that influence outcomes. You can't hold the head coach of a Gardner-Webb football team accountable for results if the athletic director is hiring the assistant coaches and the admissions department is recruiting student athletes. But you know what? We do that in our schools. If we're going to hold superintendents accountable, they have to have the authority to hire and fire and evaluate principals. Far too often, school boards get involved in that business. That is not their job. School boards are unprepared to get in the business of evaluating principals. And if we're going to hold superintendents accountable, that's their job. By the same token, principals must have authority over the budget, hiring and firing, and other programs in their schools. And the superintendent should delegate as much as possible to those principals. Again, I see school boards getting involved in those decisions, even in the individual school level. And teachers must have the authority to maintain discipline in the classroom and to award grades in accordance with student achievement. Now, those are some principles that govern highly effective schools. Let me talk a few minutes now about the differences between the traditional model and the transformed model. And I know one of the themes of the conference is transformation in education. And it's a buzzword that we're hearing all over the country and all over the literature that's coming out. And I want to talk about transformation in 7 dimensions. Standards, that's what's taught. The environment, where it's taught. Intensity, when it's taught. Curriculum, how it's taught. Instructors, who teaches it. Testing, how it's evaluated. And control, how schools are governed. And education is changing in all of these dimensions. Now let's talk about standards. What's taught? Now in the traditional model, the purpose of education is ultimately college prep and life enrichment. I mean, why else all that literature and all that algebra 2 and pre-calculus? The notion being that every child can and therefore should pursue a college preparatory curriculum. And again, I'd say, how's that working for us? It's not working very well. In the transform model, the purpose of public education is to prepare students for life and careers and for life skills versus life enrichment. For some students, 25%, 30%, career means college. But because the reality is that the vast majority of students, nationwide about 75%, will not get a 4-year college degree, we need to attend to the aspirations and needs of those students. The content in the traditional model is a one-size-fits-all common core. Every student learns the same material on the same schedule. In a transformed model, it's customized and it's personalized depending on the ability and aspirations of the individual student. The sequence of courses in the traditional model, again, is lockstep. You take this, and then take American history, and you just move on. Biology, chemistry, physics. In the transformed model, it's customized and it's personalized depending on the ability and interest of the student. What are the graduation requirements? In the traditional model, it's a fixed number of standardized core courses plus a fixed number of electives. In a transformed model, it's based on the student's competencies, goals, and aspirations. It makes no sense to me that a kid who's going to, Duke or Davidson or Wake Forest takes the same course of study as a kid who's bound for the military or the workforce. Now, who chooses? It's mandated by the state or decided by local school officials. In South Carolina, the curriculum is established by statute. And the transform model is the parent and the child to decide what curriculum they will pursue. Now, where are we going to teach this? Well, in the traditional model, the location is fixed. It's the local school for which you were zoned. In the transform model, it's flexible, it's online, it's at home, it's at school. One of my opponents in the election, fine guy, we're still friends today, his son in high school took some courses online, took some courses at the tech college, and some courses at his locally zoned public high school. I think that's wonderful, and I'd like to see more flexibility like that across our nation. What kinds of schools? Well, in the traditional model, it's the standard public school that you're zoned for. In the transform model, it's all kinds of different schools. The Montessori, the year-round, the magnet, the charter, the online, the STEM, the arts infused, etc. And parental options in the traditional model are few, and in the transform model, parental options are many. Let's talk about intensity, when it's taught. In the traditional model, it's standardized. It's based on the average ability for each day and on age for each year. But in the transform model, the pace is adaptable. It's by area, subject, based on mastery. And if some of you have ever heard of the School of One, you can Google that and look it up. It's a school in New York where every student has a different curriculum every day, and it's guided by computers, and there's teachers there to facilitate, but the pace is at the student's own level. Let's talk about the school day, the intensity. And in the traditional model, it's 6 to 7 hours a day, and the transform model is flexible, but often more than 8 hours a day. And we've seen that in some of our charter schools in high poverty areas that have a longer school day. The same is true with the intensity of the school year. The United States has a shorter school year than any industrialized nation, 175 to 180 days in class. In the transform model, the school year will be somewhere between 200 and 220 days per year. And the school calendar in the traditional model is based on the agrarian model. Even agriculture has given up that model. And in the traditional model, it's based on learning theory, and it's flexible, but it's often year-round. And we know, particularly for low-income students and language-poor homes, summer reading loss is a major problem. Curriculum, how it's taught. In the traditional model, students read and study the text, teachers demonstrate and explain. In the transform model, there's adaptive learning based on each student's learning style. We've got some gangbusters software out there that does that, using digital media that includes games and simulations. And if you can design a game around the mastery of material, kids will play that all day long. And I've seen some really good stuff. Where's the material located? In the traditional model, it's in textbooks and it's in the teacher's guide. Of course, in the transformed model, content is everywhere. It's online. There could be multiple teachers. It's distributed. The teacher's role in the traditional model. The teacher instructs and presents the material. In the transformed model, the teacher facilitates and assists learning. Let me give you one anecdote. I was in South Kilburn Elementary School, 98% poverty, very transient neighborhood. The school had an absolute rating of excellent, which was the top category, based on student achievement. And I asked the principal, I said, obviously, you guys are doing something really, really different than most of our high poverty schools, because your student results are just wonderful. What are some of the things that you're doing to beat the odds? She said, well, one of the things I've told my teachers is that if they go home at the end of the day exhausted, they aren't doing their job. The students are supposed to go home at the end of the day exhausted. But if you're standing up there teaching, the students are disengaged. You've got to figure out how to keep them engaged and challenged all day long, and you facilitate their learning. She had some other things that she was doing that were also successful, but the teacher's role goes from the deliverer of content to a facilitator who assists learning. And of course, delivery in the traditional model is teacher-centered, and in the transformed model is student-centered. Let's talk about who teaches it. In the traditional model, credentialing is based on colleges, from colleges of education is based on degrees. In the transformed model, there's multiple pathways to the classroom based on competency. It always surprised me when I was at Newberry College that our chemistry teachers and physics teachers couldn't go 6 blocks to Newberry High School and teach chemistry and physics. And my kids had a physics teacher, my children did, who didn't know momentum from velocity. Trust me, there's a difference. And I was talking to the principal. He said, Nick, I know she's a math teacher, not a very good math teacher, but you know, we just can't hire a physics teacher. I said, I got all kind of physics teachers. They'd be happy to come down here. I mean, they're teaching 19-year-olds. Surely they can teach 17 and 18-year-olds. No, they're not